The bold and the beautiful has always understood that the most dangerous storms are not born from sudden chaos, but from slow, deliberate shifts in power, desire, and identity. The return of R.J. Forrester to Los Angeles marks exactly such a shift. It is not merely the reappearance of a familiar name within the walls of Forrester Creations, but the arrival of a new force, one shaped by absence, sharpened by observation, and fueled by an ambition that no longer seeks approval. R.J. does not come back as the hesitant heir once unsure of his place. He returns transformed, carrying confidence like armor and intention like a blade, and from the moment he steps into the design house, the air around him changes. People feel it before they can articulate it. Forrester Creations, already strained by internal rivalries and external wars, becomes the stage for a far more intimate and destructive conflict. R.J.'s new presence is immediately noticeable. His posture, his speech, even the way he studies sketches and samples suggest a man who has learned patience and control. He listens more than he speaks, yet when he does speak, his words land with precision. Colleagues who once saw him as a talented but emotionally fragile Forrester now sense something colder beneath the polish. R.J. is not interested in nostalgia. He is interested in leverage. He understands that talent alone is never enough in this world. Power flows to those who know when to wait and when to strike. His ambition is not reckless, but methodical, and that makes him far more dangerous than anyone anticipates. It is within this charged environment that R.J. first notices Elektra. She stands out not because she demands attention, but because she does not. Her intelligence, her quiet competence, and her emotional depth create a gravity that pulls R.J. toward her almost against his will. At first, his interest feels like curiosity, an instinctive recognition of someone who does not quite belong to the chaos around her. But that curiosity quickly deepens into something more intense, something that unsettles him. Elektra represents a kind of stability R.J. has never truly had, and that realization awakens a hunger he does not immediately understand. Elektra, however, is not emotionally available in the way R.J. might hope. Her relationship with Will is genuine, layered with affection, shared history, and real commitment. Yet it exists under a shadow that grows darker by the day. Will carries the burden of Dylan's secret like a weight on his chest, one that distorts his behavior and fractures his focus. He is torn between loyalty and fear, between protecting Elektra and preventing a truth from detonating their lives. The strain shows in subtle ways: missed moments, distracted conversations, emotional distance that Elektra senses but cannot fully explain. R.J. notices this fracture almost immediately. He watches Will struggle to hold everything together, sees how responsibility has begun to hollow him out. Where others might turn away from such tension, R.J. leans into it. He understands instability intimately. He knows that relationships rarely collapse because of a single betrayal, but because of accumulated silence. As Will becomes consumed by Dylan's looming threat, R.J. positions himself closer to Elektra, not aggressively, not overtly, but with calculated warmth. He offers support without demanding anything in return. He listens. He remembers details. He becomes present in ways Will increasingly cannot be. At work, R.J. and Elektra begin collaborating more closely. Their creative synergy is undeniable. Ideas flow easily between them, feeding off mutual respect and unspoken understanding. R.J. encourages Elektra's instincts, validates her perspectives, and amplifies her confidence. To Elektra, this feels like oxygen. She does not see it as betrayal at first, but as relief, a space where she is not burdened by unanswered questions or emotional tension. Yet, even as she tries to maintain loyalty to Will, she cannot ignore the way R.J.'s presence makes her feel seen in a way she has been missing. Will, for his part, senses the shift long before it becomes visible. He notices the way Elektra lights up in R.J.'s presence, the ease of their conversations, the subtle intimacy that does not yet cross a line but hovers dangerously close to it. His instinct is not anger, but panic. He knows that if Dylan's secret comes out, it will devastate everything he has worked to protect. That fear makes him cling tighter, but clinging only accelerates the fracture. The more Will tries to control the situation, the more Elektra feels confined, pushed toward the very person who offers her escape. The competition between RJ and Will escalates quietly at first, manifesting in professional tension disguised as ambition. Ideas clash in meetings. Credit becomes contested. Decisions that once felt collaborative now feel territorial. Beneath the surface, however, both men understand the true battlefield. This is not about design or recognition. It is about Elektra. And unlike the corporate wars that define their families' histories, this conflict is deeply personal, driven by desire rather than legacy. As RJ's feelings intensify, so does his willingness to cross moral boundaries. He begins justifying actions he would once have condemned. He tells himself that Will is emotionally unavailable, that Elektra deserves better, that love should not be constrained by obligation or fear. These rationalizations allow a darker aspect of his personality to emerge, one that sees manipulation not as cruelty, but as strategy. RJ times his presence carefully, appearing when Elektra feels most alone, offering reassurance when Will is distant. He does not lie outright, but he allows half-truths to linger, allowing Elektra to draw conclusions that benefit him. Elektra becomes increasingly conflicted. She is torn between the love she has built with Will and the undeniable pull she feels toward RJ. Guilt gnaws at her, yet so does resentment. She senses that Will is hiding something significant, something that affects not just him but their future together. RJ's attention, once comforting, now feels dangerous, forcing her to confront feelings she would rather suppress. She knows that choosing RJ would mean embracing uncertainty, yet staying with Will feels like living in a constant state of waiting, suspended between trust and doubt. The tension reaches its breaking point when circumstances force Will and RJ into direct confrontation. What begins as a professional disagreement quickly strips away pretense, exposing the raw emotions beneath. Accusations surface, not just about ambition, but about intent. Elektra becomes the unspoken center of the conflict, the truth both men are fighting around rather than addressing directly. The room feels charged, every word heavy with implication, and for the first time, Elektra sees clearly how deeply the rivalry has consumed them both. It is at this moment of crisis that Dylan's secret finally erupts into the open. The truth, once revealed, detonates with devastating force, reshaping every relationship it touches. Will's silence is exposed not as indifference, but as fear, a misguided attempt to protect that instead caused harm. Elektra is forced to confront the reality that her relationship has been built on withheld truths, even if the intention behind them was not malicious. RJ, too, is affected as the revelation strips away some of the justifications he used to excuse his behavior. The darkness he embraced is no longer abstract. It has consequences now laid bare. The aftermath is brutal and unavoidable. Trust is fractured. Loyalties are questioned. No one emerges untouched by the truth. Elektra must make a choice not just between two men, but between two versions of herself. The one who values stability and forgiveness, and the one who longs for passion unburdened by history. Will must face the cost of his silence and decide whether he is capable of rebuilding what he has broken. RJ must confront the reality of who he has become in his pursuit of desire, and whether ambition fueled by manipulation can ever lead to genuine connection. In the end, the return of RJ Forrester reshapes more than a single love triangle. It redefines the emotional architecture of Forrester Creations itself. His presence exposes vulnerabilities long ignored, forces hidden truths into the light, and proves that the next generation is not simply inheriting old conflicts, but reinventing them in more intimate, more psychologically dangerous ways. This story is not about villains and heroes, but about people driven by longing, fear, and the desperate need to feel chosen. And in the world of the bold and the beautiful, such needs have a way of leaving lasting scars long after the truth is finally told. The bold and the beautiful has never treated revelation as an ending. Truth, once exposed, is merely the ignition point. In the aftermath of Dylan's secret detonating in the open, the characters do not find clarity or relief, they find fragmentation. What was once held together by denial, silence, and fragile hope now collapses into something raw and unrecognizable. The damage does not move outward evenly. It concentrates, burns, and reshapes those closest to the blast, forcing each of them to confront not only what they have lost, but what they are capable of becoming when survival replaces morality. Elektra is the first to feel the full weight of the fallout. The revelation strips away her ability to rationalize the growing distance between herself and Will. What once felt like emotional neglect now reveals itself as concealment, and that distinction wounds her far more deeply. She is not naive. She understands fear, loyalty, and impossible choices. But understanding does not soften betrayal when trust was the foundation on which everything else rested. Elektra realizes that 4 months she has been loving someone who is emotionally split in half, one part devoted to her, the other imprisoned by a secret he believed would destroy them both. The knowledge does not erase her feelings for Will, but it contaminates them, turning affection into grief and certainty into doubt. Will, meanwhile, is unraveling under the consequences of his silence. He has spent so long convincing himself that withholding the truth was an act of protection that he is unprepared for the reality of Elektra's pain. Seeing her hurt forces him to confront the possibility that his fear did not preserve love, but slowly poisoned it. He begins to understand that by choosing control over honesty, he deprived Elektra of agency, deciding for her what she could and could not handle. That realization fractures his sense of self. Will is no longer fighting to save a relationship. He is fighting to recognize himself in the wreckage of his own decisions. RJ watches all of this with a stillness that unsettles even him. The exposure of Dylan's secret was supposed to clarify the situation, to validate his belief that Will was unworthy of Elektra's loyalty. Instead, it complicates everything. RJ sees Elektra's devastation and realizes that pain, not opportunity, now defines the space between them. His initial instinct is to step in, to offer comfort and presence the way he has before. But this time, his actions feel heavier, charged with consequence. Every word he chooses carries the risk of exploitation, and for the first time since his return to Los Angeles, RJ hesitates. That hesitation does not last. RJ's darker instincts, once awakened, do not retreat easily. He begins telling himself that Elektra's pain proves his point that love built on secrecy is already broken, that Will's remorse cannot undo what has been done. He frames himself not as an interloper, but as an inevitability. This is how RJ justifies remaining close, positioning himself as the one constant in Elektra's collapsing world. He offers support that feels unconditional, but beneath it lies an unspoken expectation that eventually she will choose him because he stayed when everything else fell apart. Elektra senses the shift immediately. RJ's presence is no longer simply comforting, it is consuming. His attentiveness borders on possessive, his reassurance threaded with subtle implications about Will's failures. She begins to feel trapped between guilt and relief, between the desire to lean into safety and the fear of being pulled into something she does not fully understand. Elektra is intelligent enough to recognize that RJ's care comes at a price, even if that price has not yet been named. As Elektra withdraws to process her emotions, the rivalry between RJ and Will turns openly hostile. What had once been restrained by professionalism and social decorum now surfaces in sharp, public clashes. Meetings at Forrester Creations become arenas of thinly veiled confrontation. Their creative disagreements take on a personal edge, each proposal and critique infused with accusation. Colleagues sense the tension, but cannot pinpoint its source, only that something volatile is unfolding beneath the polished surface of the design house. Will's anger toward RJ is no longer rooted solely in jealousy. It is fueled by the recognition that RJ did not simply stumble into this situation, he cultivated it. Will begins replaying past moments with new clarity, seeing how RJ positioned himself during Will's absences, how his support-filled spaces Will did not realize he had left exposed. This realization ignites a fury that eclipses guilt. Will no longer sees RJ as a rival, he sees him as a threat, someone who capitalized on vulnerability with calculated intent. RJ, in turn, stops pretending that his actions are innocent. When confronted, he does not deny his feelings or his involvement. Instead, he reframes the narrative, accusing Will of emotional negligence and moral cowardice. The confrontation strips away pretense, revealing two men driven by fundamentally different fears. Will fears losing the life he tried to protect through silence. RJ fears returning to irrelevance, to a world where he is once again unseen and unchosen. Their conflict is not just about Elektra, it is about identity, about who deserves to stand at the center of the story and who must live on its margins. As tensions escalate, the consequences ripple outward, affecting the broader ecosystem of Forrester Creations. Leadership becomes concerned as productivity falters and alliances fracture. Ridge and Brooke, already consumed by their own corporate war with Katie and Spencer Publications, begin to notice the instability brewing among the next generation. To them, RJ's ambition initially reads as promise, a sign that the future of the company is secure. But as reports of conflict surface, doubts emerge. RJ's intensity, once admired, now raises questions about control and restraint. Elektra finds herself isolated in ways she never anticipated. Conversations with colleagues feel strained, heavy with unspoken judgment. She is seen not as a professional in her own right, but as the axis around which chaos turns. That perception deepens her internal conflict. She resents being reduced to a prize in someone else's battle, yet she cannot deny her own role in allowing boundaries to blur. Elektra begins questioning her instincts, wondering whether her need for emotional safety made her vulnerable to manipulation she did not want to acknowledge. The turning point comes when Elektra demands distance from both men. She steps away from the triangle not as an act of retreat, but as self-preservation. This decision shocks Will, who sees it as the final consequence of his silence, and it enrages RJ, who interprets it as rejection. For Elektra, however, it is the first choice she has made solely for herself since the crisis began. She recognizes that until she disentangles her identity from their rivalry, she will never regain clarity. This separation does not bring peace. Instead, it intensifies the unraveling. Will spirals inward, consumed by regret and a growing sense of inadequacy. Without Elektra as his emotional anchor, he is forced to confront the emptiness left behind by his choices. He begins questioning whether he is capable of honesty when the stakes are high, whether fear will always dictate his decisions. This introspection leads him to consider a dangerous path, exposing every remaining truth, no matter the cost, in the hope that transparency might salvage what remains of his integrity. RJ, on the other hand, reacts by tightening his grip on everything else he can control. He channels his frustration into work, pushing boundaries creatively and politically within Forrester Creations. His designs become bolder, more aggressive, mirroring the internal transformation he refuses to confront. Success follows, at least superficially. Recognition pours in, yet beneath the accolades lies a growing hollowness. Without Elektra's presence, RJ realizes that ambition alone cannot fill the void he has been trying to escape. The situation reaches another critical juncture when the fallout from Dylan's secret expands beyond personal relationships. Legal and professional consequences emerge, drawing scrutiny from outside forces. What was once an internal crisis becomes a public reckoning, forcing everyone involved to account for their actions. The truth, long buried, proves impossible to contain. As the walls close in, Elektra is compelled to face the aftermath not as a bystander, but as someone whose life has been irrevocably altered. She begins rebuilding slowly, deliberately, redefining herself outside the gravitational pull of Will and RJ. This process is painful, stripping away illusions she once relied on. But it is also clarifying. For the first time, Elektra understands that being chosen by someone else is not the same as choosing herself. In the shadows of these developments, RJ stands at the most dangerous crossroads of his life. He has tasted power, desire, and influence, and he has seen how easily they can justify moral erosion. The question now confronting him is not whether he can win, but what winning would actually mean. To possess Elektra at the cost of her autonomy would not be love, it would be conquest. To destroy Will completely would not bring satisfaction. It would only confirm the darkness he fears already defines him. The story does not resolve cleanly because it cannot. The damage is real, the consequences permanent. Relationships may shift, alliances may reform, but nothing returns to what it was. The return of RJ Forrester has altered the emotional landscape of Los Angeles, exposing how fragile trust becomes when ambition and fear intertwine. Dylan's secret was the catalyst, but the true conflict lies in what each character chooses to do with the truth now that it is free. In this world, redemption is never guaranteed, and love is never simple. What remains is choice raw, painful, and irreversible. And as the next chapter begins, one truth stands unchallenged. The most dangerous battles are not fought for power or legacy, but for the right to define oneself when everything familiar has burned away.